Welcome, everybody. This is day 4 of our annual online college fair, featuring this year talks from Joshua Gibbs. So if you're new today, which I hope some of you may be, I will introduce Mr. Gibbs here in a second. But then after he gives his talk, we will welcome a talk from Matthew Smith from Hildegard College. And then we'll do a Q&A afterwards if you have any questions about that. So looking to end around 5:30 p.m. So really excited. Thank you again so much for all of you being here. I know more people will join. I hope some more people will join over the next few minutes. And of course, this session is being recorded. Good. Make sure I'm doing my job. And so if you want to watch the recordings, that will be great. So Joshua Gibbs is a very old and dear friend of the CiRCE Institute. He is the director, I believe, of the Classical Teaching Institute, which he does consulting, he does lectures, he teaches. He's also the author of some of the most popular books published by CiRCE Institute, Something They Will Not Forget, Love What Lasts, A Parlay with Youth, and many others. He's also done some podcasts with us. And one of my favorite things is when I'm at a conference or something and I'm meeting somebody, they'll go, "Oh, I've heard of CiRCE Institute. I read an old blog from Joshua Gibbs." So he's just been really a huge blessing to us, and we're really glad to have him. So I'm going to pass it over to him and get this going. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, Alec. I'm glad to be here, glad to be speaking with all of you. It's a fascinating subject that I have been asked to speak about, college and your first year in college. That's sort of the more specific theme that I took in preparing these thoughts. Not what to look for in a college. The other presenters are handling that. But how to approach your first year in college, which can be a very tumultuous time in a person's life. A lot of change takes place in the years after you move out of your family home. And the talks that I'm giving this week are largely about those changes that take place and how to prepare for them, how to approach them. So at the beginning of the week on Monday, I announced that that one of my favorite proverbs, and the proverb that I was sort of using as a guiding light for these talks, was one that my mentor back in college used to use. And that is, the truth will make you free, but first it will make you angry. And I've directed the talks thus far to students, hoping, of course, that parents would listen in and get some ideas for talking with their children, or teachers listen in and get some ideas for talking with your students about preparing for that first year in college. Today's talk is how to think about the crushing moral failures of your first year in college. This is a difficult talk to give because it may sound at certain points as though I am giving license to young people to do a lot of foolish and sinful things when they go off to college, but that's really not the case. This may be a talk that you personally need to hear. This may be a talk that you need to hear for yourself, for your child, for your student. But it may also be helpful in giving counsel to others. So perhaps you need to take these thoughts to heart, but maybe you don't. Maybe I can merely give you some ideas for encouraging and provoking virtue in others who have a difficult first year in college. So you may have a hard time believing, and again, I'm speaking to students here, you may have a hard time believing that you will cave to temptation in your first year of college. You may have a hard time believing that your child will. Nonetheless, for many centuries now, the Christian tradition has been well contented to speak of the sins of youth. The so-called sins of youth, the sins which typify young people. And when we speak about the sins of youth, we're not talking about the sins of little children. The sins of youth, as they're traditionally understood are far more the sins of high school students and the sins of college students. The sins of youth are sins of incontinence. This is the way that Dante presents them in the comedy. And the sins of incontinence are lust, gluttony, sloth, and greed. And I've spoken momentarily about these sins earlier this week, but I'd like to talk very briefly or define them once again. The sins of incontinence are manifested as an uncontrolled desire for good things. And the way that Dante presents them in the comedy, the sins of youth are definitely sins. They are damnable. They are high rebellion against God, and yet they are also the least serious kinds of sin. They are the sins that do the least damage. They are the sins for which it is easiest to recover. And that doesn't mean that Dante takes them lightly. Dante takes all sins seriously. He just takes some more serious than others. So lust is a desire for sex. Sex is good, but lust is an uncontrolled desire for sex. Gluttony is the desire for food or drink, which are good, but gluttony is an uncontrolled desire. And the same is true for sloth. Sloth is a desire for rest, which is uncontrolled. Greed is a desire for money, which is uncontrolled. And sex and food and rest and money are all good, but they have to be pursued. They have to be desired in the right way to the right degree. Young people are not good at controlling their desire for good things. I don't know that any stage of life is particularly good at controlling it. But many sins of youth are committed accidentally. They are committed because, really, I think the problem with sins of incontinence is that they emerge from a failure to create thick, heavy lines, to bar off or to fence off danger areas in the home, danger areas on your phone, danger areas in college. The lines between what are allowable or what is allowable and not allowable are faint and unconsidered. And so they're crossed because of recklessness and thoughtlessness, not because of an intention to do evil, but because of a failure to plan to do good. Thus, we have all the cliches that now cluster around college life: promiscuity, drunkenness, lack of hygiene, oversleeping, overeating, and so forth. And for students who are raised on conventional, middle-class, evangelical morality, sexual sin and drunkenness, and whatever sin you want to call drug use, are particularly grievous. And by that, I mean that they plague the conscience far more than sins like cheating and stealing, which Dante considered to be the more serious. One of the better examples of this kind of grievous weight that sins of incontinence put on the sinner can be found and described in great detail in Tom Wolfe's novel, I Am Charlotte Simmons, which is about a good girl, a good smart girl from the sticks, who gets a full ride at an Ivy League school and who then believes that her life is over in the aftermath of losing her virginity to a popular athlete who she shortly discovers thereafter is a complete loser and a cretin. Sexual sin and drunkenness can be so embarrassing, they can be so shameful, even if no one from back home finds out about them, that they prompt young Christians to do something even worse, which is to give up on going to church. Young Christians are given to feel that it is hypocritical to go to church on Sunday morning after a night of drinking and fooling around. And so they don't go, or else they feel confronted in church. They feel confronted on their sin. They feel uncomfortable. And so they avoid church in the wake of their sin because it's painful. It's mortifying to sit there in the pew and to feel the incongruity between what you claim to believe and how you live. Now, I don't mean to make light of sexual sin or drunkenness. These are most definitely, sexual sin is a sin that is corrupting. It's grievous. It's serious. Sexual sin is serious sin, and it has serious earthly consequences. However, it is important to remember, especially in your youth, that sexual temptation and sexual sin, or any kind of temptation to what's commonly thought of as debauchery, are a means of the devil. They are not an end in itself. So they're a part of a bigger strategy to wreck your life. They are not the furthest extent of the wreckage of your life. The real end that the devil has in mind with these sins is apostasy and despair, the forsaking of hope, the attempt to induce a soul to become too weighed down, or to create the optical illusion that the soul is too weighed down with shame to repent. However, it is important to remember when going off to college that going to church is not the reward for living well that week. At very least, that is not what a real church is. If church is nothing more than a place to meet with people who are like-minded, or if church is fun and exciting and geared toward forming meaningful relationships, then maybe it is a reward for doing well. But a real church is a hospital. A real church is a place for the sick. Jesus came for the sick. And if you are sick, you need to go to church. What this means is that if you give yourself to the sins of youth on a Saturday night, you need to be in church on a Sunday morning. In the exact same way, if you're in a car accident on Saturday night, you need to be in a hospital on Sunday morning. I was raised in a home that was doggedly committed to Sunday morning worship. I don't mean to be glib when I put it this way, but we went to church religiously. And I took that habit with me to college. And when I was in college, I was given to all the same sins of youth that I have been discussing here. I credit my current Christian faith, my present Christian faith, to the fact that I was raised with such a deep commitment to Sunday morning church attendance. No matter how badly I behaved during the week, I went to church on Sunday morning. And I would say that there are numerous points in my life where, if I'm telling the story of my life and trying to tell it convincingly or realistically, there are numerous points in my life where I really should have left the faith. It would have made sense in the story of my life for me to give up on the Christian faith. But I kept going to church, and the temptation to apostasy ultimately passed. So I don't mean to make light of sexual sin or drunkenness or drug use or sloth or any of the sins of youth. But the worst thing that you can do in your first year of college is not any of those things. The worst thing that you can do in your first year of college is to give up on church. I want to provide, before I close, with a bit of a counterbalance to this claim. So the claim is, and I'll repeat it one more time, that of all the sins of youth that you might commit in your first year of college, it is far worse to quit church, to give up on church. And it is often the worst part of sins of incontinence that they induce apostasy, or that they induce giving up on church, which typically leads to apostasy shortly thereafter. When you don't have a lot of tangible evidence that you're a Christian, you quit claiming to be a Christian. And if there is no evidence and no claim that you are a Christian, then it doesn't make much sense to say that you actually are one. So it's of the utmost importance that you go to church, and for all the adults in the room, that you raise your children to have a dogged commitment to Sunday morning church attendance. Now, at the same time that I say all of this, I don't mean that the sins of incontinence are freebies or that the sins of youth can all simply be balled up into a single expression, the sins of youth, and sort of pitched over your shoulder as soon as you turn 30. That is not the way that sins of incontinence work. They are serious. And when I say that, what I mean is that if when you grow up, when you get old, when you're in your 40s, should you happen to meet someone or know someone whose life is falling apart, a person whose life is rather obviously falling apart, and there's no ambiguity about the fact that this person's life is in shambles. I don't mean like they're homeless or they're broke, not necessarily. But if you encounter someone who's been unfaithful to their spouse, on the road to divorce, somebody who has sinned themselves sick and is dealing with the physical consequences of a life of uncontrolled appetites, somebody for whom medical bills are racking up because they could not control themselves. And if you're to get such a person in an honest mood, and you were to ask them, how did this happen? And if the person is willing to tell you the entire story of their life, how they got this way, more often than not, that person will begin telling their story at about the point that they were 16 or 17. The stories about lives that ultimately end in disaster and misery by 35 or 40 often begin at the age of 16 or 17. And I say that frankly to scare you. 16 or 17 is not too young to begin that life you will live when you are fully grown. I sometimes tell my students that there are marionette strings that are attached to 40-year-olds that are controlled by 16-year-olds. That your 16-year-old self has your 40-year-old self on marionette strings, and that you can determine the shape, the habits that you will live by later on in small ways, beginning when you're quite young. So when you go off to college, remember these two things. On the one hand, there is no future you, there is only the present you. And the present you controls what you will ultimately become. And then a great many tragic lives begin with events or bad decisions that are made in late high school and in college. At the same time, those sins that are most likely to weigh down your conscience and embarrass you and shame you are the sort of sins that you go to church to handle. Church is not the reward for a life well lived. Church is a hospital. It is a place for healing your wounds. And if you are wounded in sin over the course of the week, then you need to go to church more than anything else. So don't allow those wounds to fester. When you go off to college, or this may be your story, this may be the story of a friend. You may see a friend who's given his life over to decadence in college and feels too ashamed to darken a church door on Sunday morning, given how fresh his memory of Saturday night is. Don't allow your friends to fall prey to this delusion that they have to be well in order to go to church. Our Lord came for the sick, not for the healthy. And if you are spiritually sick, then you need a spiritual hospital. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joshua, for that talk. Alec, am I good just to jump in here?
Yes, sir. Let me spotlight you. There we go.
Well, thank you, Alec. Thank you, Joshua. And it's interesting to having taught in higher education for almost 20 years now. If I were asked to warn college-going young people about one one failure that will stick with them in their college years, it would be exactly that, failing to remain to be a church-going Christian above all. Well, thank you to CiRCE for having us, Hildegard College, out to tell you a bit about our college. And I hope that what I have to say is more relevant. It's relevant beyond just describing what we're doing at our small new college in California here, but can be informative for all parents and students listening to this live or on recording in the college decision. It's something that I personally have thought a lot about, and the people I work with have, hence founding a new college 3 years ago. And I want to begin by describing a scene that I found myself in almost 15 years ago now, after I finished my PhD, was really excited to get my first job, and I got a job, a tenure track position at, I think, what most people would consider to be a large-ish Christian university of 5 or 6 thousand undergraduate students. And there I am, I'm about 30 years old, and I'm teaching, and I had the good fortune of being part of the founding faculty team of a new Great Books Honors College at this Christian university. This is what I wanted to do. This is the kind of education I had in college, a Great Books one where we're reading the classics, we're discussing them in Socratic seminars, we're asking the big questions, we're growing in this community of faith and friendship. And I found myself in one, and I couldn't be more pleased. And that first year that I taught freshmen, and we were looking at ancient literature, Aristotle and Plato and Confucius and Tacitus and Cicero, all those greats. It was like we were in Plato's academy in Athens. We were asking questions like, what really is justice, and what is virtue really? What is love? What makes a human human really? Uh, Students were honest with each other. They were becoming friends. And as I like to say, the conversations were becoming more than the sum of their parts, because not of my teaching prowess as a 30-year old, but because of the environment that we were in, and these shared expectations of this Great Books Honors College. But then the first year passed, and we all went on break for the summer. We came back, and I was teaching the same students that I had their freshman year as sophomores now in this Great Books Honors College. And I get into class, and now we're in the Middle Ages. Now we're reading Augustine, Boethius, and Thomas Aquinas, and Dante, Bonaventure, and Teresa of Avila. And I'm expecting the same magic to happen, but it didn't. It didn't happen. Something had changed with these students. We would be talking about something like justice or virtue or contemplation of God. And the students, many of them seemed jaded, like they had grown out of the program, like they were too intellectually mature for it. And I would hear, I discerned a pattern in the comments I would hear students make, something like, that's not what justice is. Justice is just an illusion, and it really only has meaning to the people who have power. Or if we're discussing the Old Testament, why are we spending so much time trying to dig into what Abraham's faith consisted in? Why are we talking about Abraham's faith? Don't you know, the student would say, that the Old Testament is really just about empire and conquest. I thought, where are these comments coming from? How can we talk about, I remember a student saying, how can we be talking about virtue? That conversation is ableist, that is discriminatory towards the disabled. And it's sexist, because virtue comes from the Latin for man. These comments, why are we reading so many dead white men? We would hear. And I thought, what happened to these students? They didn't seem to trust each other. They weren't curious and hungry for knowledge. Really, I didn't think they were reading the books very carefully anymore, if at all. And it was like I was talking to somebody else instead of those students. And it was like I was talking to somebody else because in a certain way I was talking with somebody else. What I was talking to were these students who had become replicas of some of their professors. I call this the sophomore effect. this, for some context of what I mean, this Great Books Honors College, like many of them at universities, was part of the general education program. So as freshmen, students are mostly taking gen ed classes. In these lucky students' cases, it was in the great books. By the time they were sophomores, they began taking courses and mid-level courses in the areas of their majors. It could be social work or psychology or biology or education or English, whatever it might be. And as they're taking classes as sophomores, I'm realizing they're now replicating without, by the way, the careful and scrutinizing thought that we practice in the Great Books program. They're now replicating, testing out, I think, but rehearsing the arguments that they're told simply to believe in their major courses. So maybe they had a Bible professor who was was whose pet project was Marxist liberation theology, or a psychology professor who talked about love, the phenomenon of love in psychology classes, as if it were merely a social and cognitive phenomenon, or an education professor who just dismissed out of the gate the idea that the purpose of learning is to become wise, but instead the study of education was just the study of social justice or something like that. And it's not that I think these conversations don't have merit. I do think they have merit. But more importantly, it was clear to me that something had broken in this transition from freshman year to sophomore year. And according to the other professors that these students had, their holistic experience, the students' holistic experience of college, was really just an afterthought to their individual areas of expertise. And this was the way I realized, even in my second year of this tenure track job, that the modern university is designed. There's no unifying idea that guides students through school. There's no single, even umbrella answer to the question, what is education for? Our little Great Books Honors College was nice, but it was undermined by the structure of this larger university because there, instead of being one guiding, overarching answer to the question, what is learning for, that all professors might interpret differently, there were 550 different answers to that question because there were 550 undergraduate faculty at the school who all controlled their own little fiefdoms. And everyone just assumed, it seemed to me, everybody at the university just assumed that this intellectual dysphoria that students were experiencing was just the way things had to be. It was kind of a necessary evil. This is my um, this is my disillusionment story with higher education. I'm in higher education. I believe in it and its importance. But this is when I realized that for me, it wasn't doing its job anymore, and that my perspective on college had changed. I'm going to share my screen here. I think I have that capability. There we go. So that is the backdrop to the founding of Hildegard College. And I'm talking about the founding of Hildegard College because we are a very young school. We're only and 2.5 years into our existence as an undergraduate program. And I want to tell you a bit about why we started this school. And to do that, I want to talk to you as a parent. In my case, a parent of 3 children. My oldest is 16. I have another teenager and then an 11-year-old. And my children are classically educated. They go to a classical school. They know Latin. They they can tell you what classical education is. They can tell you about their spiritual formation and how that's integrated into their schooling. Um, but about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I joined with a group of other faculty who had similar experiences to me, mostly parents and business leaders, all of whom saw something lacking in higher education. And those problems became especially acute and important to us as we're now looking at the prospect of our kids going to college and the kinds of compromises that we see that we thought it would inevitably entail. They might find their way in college. All kids do. There are a bunch of university options out there. but none of them really felt great to us. Compromises in spiritual and moral health, in financial well-being in terms of college debt, compromises in academic rigor. So many classically educated high school grads go on to experience their freshman level college courses as boring. And as as a administrator at the time in higher education, I had realized another area of compromise were all of these empty promises about career preparation that college offers, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute. So, as a group of Christian faculty and business leaders gathered to think about college together, we didn't set out with the idea to start a new college. Instead, to ask a question that whose answer is not necessarily college. And the question is, what actually is the best way for our own children to spend the years after high school? What's actually the best way to spend these years, 18 to 22 approximately? To answer that, of course, you need to know what the goals are. What do you want? Do you want intellectual and spiritual and moral formation? Do you want professional preparation? Do you want to move into financial independence? And there's this kind of social container we've created for the 18 to 22-year-olds that we hold for college as a coming of age experience, as an education for career and life preparation. But increasingly, for the group that I was part of, and for so many people, I assume many people here as well, the answer of college is feeling more and more insufficient to us as an answer to the question, what is actually the best way for our children to spend the years after college? So, what we did is we began breaking down this question, and and regardless of university options that were out there, trying to identify what are the things we want for our children in college, and then trying to answer those and imagining, can we design a college for these things? Can we design a college around these things? So we gathered these Christian faculty industry leaders and thought, let's invite young adults to be part of something new and different and brave and uncompromising. And we started with a blank slate and identified these. And I'm going to walk through quickly the 4 questions that we asked that helped us identify what it was that we thought was the best way. What did we think the best way to spend these years after high school were? What are these best ways, and can we design a college around them? Spoiler, the answer was yes, that's what we did. And we started Hildegard College, a small micro college in Southern California. We have 1 degree. It's a bachelor's degree in liberal arts and entrepreneurship. I'll tell you how we got there and what it consists of. But let's begin with the first question that we asked. We thought, well, of course, we set aside this 18 to 22-year window in our children's lives for intellectual formation. It's not really popular to say it this way, but we want our children to become intelligent. We want them to be smart. We want them to grow in mind, to become independent thinkers, but also careful thinkers and wise. So we asked, what is the best way to help our 18 to 22-year-olds learn to think well? And as a classical educator myself, there are very few areas where I see coincidence between uh, ancient approaches to a question and kind of modern post-Enlightenment answers to the question. But what is the best way to help someone learn to think well? Turns out that people like Socrates and Cicero, Augustine, Boethius, Aristotle happen to be in agreement with modern learning scientists who say the best way to learn to think well is through active learning. It's through common learning experiences. It's through small cohorts and not a big anonymous passive experience. It's by addressing whole problems and reading whole books. This was not news to any of us. And even though we all know it, so many schools kind of fail to do it for economic reasons, for sociological reasons, or whatever they might be. But we decided, well, we can do that. We can build a school where at the center of the curriculum is a great books program that has very, very clear guiding outcomes. We call it the Foundations of Thought curriculum. So every student at Hildegard College for 3 years of their education. Each semester is focusing on one of 6 questions fundamental to what it means to be human. You see them listed here. What is the good? Who is God? What makes a society just? What does it mean to be free? What is nature? And what is the human condition? And our goal is for students to become fluent in history's best answers to these questions. These are small cohort Socratic courses. Many of us are familiar with the format of this. We encourage students to be honest and authentic, and we expect a lot from them in terms of participation. Each one of these semesters is not just a single course, it's kind of the whole semester in Foundations of Thought, translates to 9 units at our school, and each term, and its own little chronological journey from antiquity to the present in history's best answer to these questions. So all of the kind of great works, great authors that you see in great books programs around the country are represented here, but we organize them around these themes. So that is the question of what's the best way for 18 to 22-year-olds to grow intellectually in the years after high school. We think that a school environment, in fact, could provide a really good answer to that. A more challenging question, though, is around professional development. What's the best way to help our 18 to 22-year-olds prepare for life as an adult in the economy, in society, in civic life, professionally? What's the best way to do that? And for us, before we launched Hildegard College, we spent a lot of time talking to business leaders and employers and simply asking them, what is it that you want in grads? What is it that Gen Z grads tend to lack? What is it that you want to see more of? And I am confident that their answers will surprise nobody here, because everything that you would say, they said. They said communication skills, the ability to solve complex problems, the ability to work collaboratively in a team. They tend to use the word critical thinking. I don't think they really know what they mean by that term. I prefer the word understanding, but critical thinking, being able to see the causes of the phenomenon that we experience. If it's a market research, what's the cause of that market phenomenon or whatever it might be? We all know what the employers say. We tend to call them soft skills. A recent report kind of describes where the greatest disparity is between, as it says here, percentage of employers who indicate a skill was very important relative to perceptions that students are very prepared in that skill. So where students think they're really prepared, this shows what employers actually experience. And you see the greatest disparity at the top in oral communication, adaptability, flexibility, critical thinking, complex problem solving. Notice at the very bottom where there is almost no disparity is in technical understanding of things, being able to use technical instruments. Based on this report, this is not something, if we want to prepare our young people professionally, that a program should spend a particular amount of time on. You can see that in the decline of computer science, for instance, as a college major with a positive ROI, a positive return on investment. Harder and harder to make that argument. So the question that we asked was, what if we took this employer feedback really, really seriously? And it sounds like an obvious question, but schools don't ask it. They don't ask it because they already kind of are what they are. They already have their faculty. Their faculty have tenure. They're almost impossible to fire or lay off. They already have the kind of territorialism and fiefdoms of the school that fed something like the problem of the sophomore effect. But we're not a school yet, so we can ask the question, what if we took this employer feedback really, really seriously and designed the professional side of education in answer to employers' feedback? What if we targeted the most important qualities that an employer wants? And I would put at the top of the list, what we're seeing now is teachability. Employers say, well, I'm going to have to teach them to do their job anyway. They need to be teachable. And so they need to have communication skills. They need to have problem solving skills. It's all for the sake of being teachable and adaptable. What if we took that really, really seriously? And our answer is what we call the entrepreneurial arts. The entrepreneurial arts. We call them the entrepreneurial arts because in our minds, to learn to do things well is best done by learning to build them well. We teach the entrepreneurial arts in a side of our curriculum called the Entrepreneur Lab. And it's called that because while students are in their Foundations of Thought seminars studying Euclid and Newton and Shakespeare with no technology out around a common table, just with their books open, looking one another in the eyes, later that afternoon, they're in the Entrepreneur Lab doing hands-on, design-focused work in business, leadership, civics, and economics. This is if you want to think about it as a kind of project-based program, you can. It's not a business major, though. Almost everybody goes into business. If you think about the jobs that people have, it's always for a business of some kind. This is not a business major. This is a major in the entrepreneurial arts, which we treat analogously to the liberal arts. And what do I mean by that? Specifically, students spend a semester each on one of 8 core themes of the entrepreneurial arts. This is developed in conversation with business leaders in our own entrepreneurial advisory board. You can see them here. These are the essentials of organizational design and finance and communication and technology, market experience, economics that college grads need to be successful in whatever they do. Very, very few of the students that come to Hildegard College want to be entrepreneurs in the kind of conventional sense of the term, as if they're building a new tech startup in Silicon Valley and they're going to sell it 3 years later and become really, really rich with it. Some of our students work in tech, some of them are becoming founders, but entrepreneurship for us is a pedagogy. It's an approach to learning. These are things that everybody benefits from learning, and it's a way to help students convert the wisdom and conviction that they build in Foundations of Thought to life after college. And students in the Entrepreneur Lab at Hildegard are getting real experience. And I want to just spotlight a couple of the students I was talking with recently. Real experience. This is Xavier. He's a sophomore. He's from Virginia. In fact, I think he found out about us through some participation with CiRCE as it happens. I'm not totally sure about that. Xavier spent his first year at Hildegard in the Entrepreneur Lab. As he's reading great books at the same time, he's interested in the industry of behavioral health care. And so he spent the first year not knowing where he would fit into it, kind of exploring the challenges that that industry faces. And what he found is that behavioral and mental health care in that industry is becoming, especially as he would put it, industrialized and overly mediated by technology. At the same time that screen addiction and lack of human interaction is a cause of mental health crises, yet behavioral health care is becoming more and more mediated. And he was interested in how to return human interaction and true friendship to behavioral health care. So he got plugged in with one of our civic partners, which is what we call the organizations that students work with if they want to, called Alter Behavioral Health here in California. He got plugged in with them, and he's now knee deep in a project for them that has just been converted to a paid internship. So he's getting paid for this work, doing kind of AI research and media production, arguing for the importance of friendship and human connections and mental health care. He's building an online training platform. Here is him in action. I was able to sit in on one of his presentations for one of the videos he produced, using AI technologies, but also using real research into cognitive and behavioral health. There he is. And if you asked Xavier about his work, of course he's going to talk about the cool things he's doing on the tech platform, but he's just as likely to bring up Cicero's work on friendship than he is anything else in the industry. He's more likely to talk about Dostoevsky's novel, The Brothers Karamazov. And this is the unique kind of integration and integrative experience students at Hildegard tend to have. Just one other spotlight. This is Tanner. He's a junior, so he's a member of our first incoming class of fall of 2023. And Tanner is a wonderful student who has developed this kind of passion for helping organizations that are doing good work but don't really have the savvy to grow as they want to. And so he is actually a founder with some people in our shared campus space that I'll describe in a minute of Zero Carbon Copy. He started this company just about 6 months ago with some other folks Zero Carbon Coffee essentially white labels coffee brands for nonprofit humanitarian organizations and ministries working directly with coffee roasters. They have sustainability as part of their mission, but ultimately their impact is to extend the reach and value that nonprofit organizations can give to donors and beneficiaries. What's interesting about Tanner is he's doing this kind of venture building work, but he does not want to be an entrepreneur. He does not want to do zero carbon coffee forever. Tanner's into philosophy. He's planning to go to graduate school and preparing for that right now. You're much more likely to hear him talking about Kierkegaard or Immanuel Kant than you are product market fit and value proposition design and organizational structure. But he's doing that stuff at the same time. I think I have a action shot of him. Oh, this is the website that he developed for it, at least part of it. And importantly, these are not extracurriculars at Hildegard College. All of our students at some point began getting involved designing things, and they change it all the time. Last year, Xavier was working with a kind of running club that he helped develop. Now he's doing work in behavioral health. Last year, Tanner was working on and actually launched a kind of collaborative music platform that helped people collaborate on music that they were composing together online. Now he's doing zero carbon copy. So these students are getting experience in different industries, but they're not extracurriculars. In the Entrepreneur Lab, when they're in that course, they're applying it to these real world ventures. So we're not saying, for instance, Xavier, make a marketing plan and then take a test showing us that you know how to make a marketing plan and we'll give you a grade on it. We're saying make a marketing plan and then actually do it. Actually put it out there and see if it generates any new leads or customers. Okay, so back to being a parent for a second. We talked about the intellectual health. What's the best way for students to grow intellectually in the years after high school? What's the best way for them to grow in professional development? Financially, we asked the question, how do we break the cycle of student debt? Back to being a parent again, I don't want my kids to go into debt to attend college unless it's absolutely necessary and it's something really, really special. But I also want them to experience the financial responsibility for their own education. Our solution to this is to have a price point, a tuition point at Hildegard that is about a quarter that of most private universities. We are independent of federal funding. We don't accept federally subsidized loans, and so we keep our tuition really, really low with no additional fees. And yet, we also encourage students to work while they're in school, and we design the course schedule to make it feasible for them to do it. We have a kind of maximum number of hours during the week that they can work. But the idea is by the time they're upperclassmen, especially the work that they're doing and the money they're bringing in for themselves is integrated with their professional developments, integrated with whatever area of industry or work they're interested in exploring, be that in the arts or education, the nonprofit sector, finance, whatever it might be. So we are a debt-free institution. None of our students have ever gone into any debt to come to Hildegard College. We offer no merit-based scholarships because we're in kind of our whole school is an honors college, but we do offer some financial aid. So lastly, we've talked about intellectual formation. We've talked about professional development. We've talked about financial health. Again, as a parent, I care about their spiritual and moral maturity. And this is what Joshua talked with us a bit about, spiritual and moral maturity in college. Here's the scene that I don't want my kids to experience. As a college professor going on 20 years, I've seen it 1,000 times. Here's what I don't want them to experience. I don't want a recent PhD in psychology or history or biology, philosophy, music, whatever it might be, a recent PhD with an entitlement complex because they think they're overqualified, teaching a large class of 200 students, or for that matter, even 40 students, making students who disagree with them feel small. I don't want my kids to feel small. I don't want that person to have a chip on their shoulder, challenge traditional beliefs, because that's what most grad students in these areas are trained to do. And I don't want my children feeling the pressure to assimilate into that impersonal class culture because that's what it means to succeed as a student in that class. I'm okay with my child asking real questions. I want them to. I want them to be honest. I want them to explore. But I don't want them to adopt what a professor tells them to adopt simply because you have to succeed in that class. I don't want them bullied intellectually. And we can't force our children to believe what we want them to believe, but we can model for them what we believe, and either they're going to think we're crazy or they're going to think that we really mean it. This is the in loco parentis role that professors and college mentors have. But at the same time that I don't want my kids intellectually bullied out of their faith, I also don't want them coddled. I don't want my kids coddled. Um, Statistics for faith attrition, that is for people walking away from the faith after college, are more worrying than statistics about students losing their faith during college. It's that 23 to 30-year-olds, that window that has the greatest faith attrition if you look at the research that's there. And this disparity is even greater as it happens for students who go to Christian colleges just by virtue of the fact that most students who go to Christian colleges are Christians. Interestingly and importantly to me, what I see is that it's not just intellectual forces, but cultural forces that really challenge students' faith in college. And so at Hildegard, we've sought to build a culture of young people and mentors. So professors and students who are facing the same direction, seeking Jesus together while being guided through intellectual and cultural challenges that these students will undoubtedly face when they graduate from college. So there is an aspect of Hildegard College in which we truly do explore some of the difficult questions, especially the cultural ones. We want our students thinking about politics and sex and gender ethics. Uh, we want them to be informed about the importance of institutions and to think about what the critiques of institutions are. We want them to be thinking about civic society. We want them to test traditional values, but we want to do it in an environment where we're seeking to reinforce, not just defend, but truly understand what the church has given us in its own intellectual tradition. As I say here, the biggest risks of faith during college are cultural. And so Hildegardians, that's what we call our students at Hildegard. Hildegardians seek to understand who we are as humans and also the rich history of the church's answers to these cultural threats. So institutionally, what we do, every Hildegardian is assigned a faculty mentor that they're required to meet with every month. They also have monthly coaching with another faculty member. There's lots of mentorship built into the program. Every student studies the scriptures, the Christian scriptures, and also robustly studies the history of Christian thought, theology, but also Christian thought outside of theology and mathematics and natural philosophy or the sciences in the arts. And every Hildegard student is required to attend church. So, apropos Joshua's talk earlier this evening, we require every one of our students to attend church. We have church partners. We encourage them to go worship at those places, but they can choose a different church if they'd like. Being a small college, it's important that they have that community outside of our school as well, and it's critical to us that they actually attend church. So that is Hildegard College in a nutshell. We started the school because we asked the question as honestly as we could, what is actually the best way to spend the years after high school? Our answer as an institution is not the only good answer to that question, but we think it's one good one and the best answer for a certain kind of young person. Hildegard College, as I say here, believes that one of the best ways to spend the years after high school is in a small community of Christian students and mentors, studying great books and growing in spiritual and professional maturity. That's our goal. So much of college is becoming an adult. And for us, union with God is the end of all human moral activity and practical endeavor. That's what we're pointed toward. But our instrument to get there is a school where students are studying great books and studying the entrepreneurial arts. Just a quick snapshot of our degree. To recap, it's a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts and Entrepreneurship. We study 6 foundational questions, while at the same time students are working through 8 modules in the entrepreneurial arts. We're doing this always in an integrated way. So when we're studying, for instance, this term, the students are asking the question, what is the good? And they're in the entrepreneurial module, marketing, growth, and influence. And so in that module as well, students are asking, what is the good? What does it mean for there to be a good that guides our work in marketing, growth, and influence? This is our answer in a way to what's next for classically educated students. What does a classically informed education look like after the K through 12 experience? It could, for some, look like more of that same work. It could look like the quadrivium and the trivium. But we think for other sorts of classically educated students, it also means a kind of immersion into culture, practice designing things, exploring different industries. Just a quick look at our values. We believe that education is about relationship. We're a small college, both because we're new, but also because we want it to be small. We want it to be small. We believe that people learn and grow when they love what they're doing, and they love when they're doing it with other people in relationship. To give you a sense of our size, this fall of 2026, we're still accepting applications, by the way. I expect about 20 undergraduates at our college, so a very small community. We reject student debt. To date, have found a way for every student who wants to come to Hildegard without taking out student loans. Another one of our values, as I put it here, is we've popped the college bubble, meaning our campus is called Fieldwork. You've seen photos of it throughout this presentation. Fieldwork is a mission-driven co-working space in Costa Mesa, California. So that's right next to Newport Beach in Orange County, south of LA County, if you don't know the geography there. We're purposely immersive. You walk up to our college and some people think, what I don't understand, is this a college? This looks kind of like a creative learning and working space, because that's what it is. And we want there to be a kind of porousness that permeates through our college, so that we don't have to bridge college and the real world, but it already is integrated that way. We believe, I've said this, that union with God is the end of all learning. I can talk about that for a long time, but I won't right now. And lastly, we believe that liberal and practical education should be joined. The liberal arts, the traditional classical liberal arts as we know them, were not intended to be studied in a kind of ivory tower or just in a monastery. They are a reward in themselves, but they were always intended to make free leaders in society. And for us, that includes the city of man, but also the city of God. So liberal and practical education ought to be joined. Last slide here. Who is Hildegard College for? And I want to begin by saying Hildegard College is most certainly not for every 18 to 22-year-old. It is not. It is for someone who wants to create culture, doesn't want to be that kind of anonymous kid sitting in the back of the 200-student lecture hall, wants to be known, doesn't want to just consume culture, but create it. It's for a kind of student who wants a classical foundation, but also wants that professional development. I think the way that a lot of our students kind of say it is, I want that classical foundation. I want to grow in that intellectual and spiritual maturity, but I want to know how to do something with it. And that's what we are. I think it's important, given our youth as an organization, that students who come to Hildegard want to be part of something new. We treat our students largely as co-founders. Every one of our students has a major impact on the culture of the college in perpetuity, and they think of themselves as kind of builders alongside us. It's really kind of a special thing that comes out of that. And lastly, high school grads. Who's Hildegard College for? It's for high school grads who want a rigorous college education, even if they don't exactly know what they want to move into. I think the statistic is around 7% of college grads have a career in the area or the major for which they chose a college. So almost every college-going student thinks, I'm going to do this thing. This is what I want to be. My daughter, who's 16, wants to be a filmmaker, and she might be, and I hope she is. Statistically, and it's hard to have this conversation with her, if she studies film in college, there's about a 7% chance she's actually going to go into film as a meaningful career. I don't mean that to be discouraging. What I mean is that we're investing 17-year-olds with the decision of sometimes $200,000 in investment and 4 years, sometimes more, that they're told to make because of a specific career that they want. And 17-year-olds don't know what they want to do. Most people have three careers before they hit 30, even if they've gone to college. So we are for people who both know what they want to do, but if you don't know what you want to do and you want to explore different industries and not just hear about them, but actually get your hands dirty with them, that's the kind of thing you could do at Hildegard College. So with that, that is essentially all I wanted to cover. I am happy to hear any questions, field any questions you have. Um, and I'm seeing some comments here. So if you have a question, put it in the chat. I purposely did not take up all of my time, and I promise we won't go all the way to what's 2 o'clock here, but 5:30 your time. But let me look here at the chat. Can you talk about how your group of founders chose the name Hildegard? I'm assuming is named after Saint Hildegard. Yes, Hildegard of Bingen. We chose Hildegard because Hildegard is one of history's shining examples of a polymath. Polymath being somebody who is not just a narrow expert in one thing, but has expertise in many things. And it's through that person's knowledge of all of these different trades, arts, and areas of knowledge that their impact grows. So Hildegard herself practiced medicine. She wrote theology. She wrote one of the first kind of late medieval plays. She's especially well known for musical composition. She wrote philosophy. She's a polymathic person, and in many ways, Hildegard is designed for polymaths. Many of our students end up focusing by the time they're upperclassmen, at least in one kind of specific industry or in one skill set. But the idea is that they're building all of these skill sets of heart, mind, and also practical skills that they can take with them. So that's the reason for that. Do we offer any summer programs where a student could experience some aspect of the school? We are considering a summer program this summer, but we also have an open invitation to anybody that wants to come visit our school. And a really good time to do it is during our monthly sprints. When I use the word sprint, that you should think, what in the world is he talking about? On the entrepreneurial arts side of our program, students follow not a typical class rhythm where they're meeting, one class meets 3 times a week for an hour each, and you're kind of in and out, and that's that. Instead, we follow what we think is a kind of workshop or real life startup rhythm to the entrepreneurship classes. In Foundations of Thought, they meet 3 times a week for a deep 3-hour conversation each time. In the entrepreneurial arts, we go through a monthly rhythm where the first week of each month, there's a full day, a whole day long intensive sprint where students are being introduced to a particular tool. If it's business model design in the fall, for instance, they might be introduced to a business model canvas. They're practicing that, they're learning about it. All of that is kind of downloaded and workshopped in that one full day. And then for the next 3 weeks, they're participating in faculty-led workshops, group and one-on-one coaching over the next 3 weeks to kind of flesh out their idea and then ultimately deliver that business model canvas 3 weeks later. So, in answer to your question, a great time to come, and this is going to be, I think, announced on our website this week, Hildegard Preview Weekends, is over the course of a Thursday through a Friday. And you're obviously welcome to stay for Saturday. Right now, it's sunny and about 77 degrees out, so it's not a bad time to visit here. But come out. You can come to a student and a parent can visit our Foundations of Thought class. We're studying what is the good and working through great books right now. I think they're reading Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice at the moment. On a Thursday evening, then you can stay for maybe the first half of that Friday sprint to get a sense of what that's like, and then you can meet with us and spend the rest of the afternoon enjoying kind of the beautiful California coast here. So no summer program, but if anybody's interested, the best way to visit, and you're welcome to email admissions or through that QR code, get in touch with us. You can email me directly, president@hildegard.college. But get in touch with us and come out on a Thursday, Friday for one of these sprint experiences. It's really kind of a cool time, and you get to see our campus and meet our students. Any other questions? All right. Well, you have my info. You have a way to get a hold of us. We would love to meet you. We get to know our applicants really, really well. So feel free to reach out. Thank you to CiRCE. Alec, any kind of final thoughts from you? Yes, I see one question. Right now, we have a student from Virginia. We had a student from Massachusetts come recently. But yes, in fact, most of our students are not, and most of our applicants over the first 3 years have not come from Southern California. Oddly to us, maybe surprising to us, they all come from out of the area. So yeah, we have most of our students are from out of the area, out of state. Any closing thoughts there, Alec? Or should I sign us off?
Think we're all set. Thank you again, Dr. Smith. Really appreciate it. Yes, please check out Hildegard College. They've been a very great blessing to CiRCE and their partnerships with us. So we're really grateful for you to be here today and for your thoughts. And yeah, thanks again so much. Appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.